Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in War Thunder we have another devblog. This is for the T64-BV. It's not technically a new vehicle, but it's basically talking about a new modification for a vehicle. So remember when the BMP came out, and then once it was out, a few updates later, or maybe even one update later, we had a new ATGM system that was put onto it in the form of a modification. Now the T64-BV is very similar to that, apart from instead of a new ATGM launcher, you get ERA. So very much in the same sense as the Brennus or the M60 Rise, where these machines have these ERA blocks on them, which basically make it very good against heat or anything HE related, ATGM wise, even rockets, and even sometimes bombs, saving you from situations which you may be kind of surprised, that you survive from. But most of the time it won't make a lot of difference, and we'll go through that in this devblog. First thing I want to point out is in the video here that they've done, one of the interesting things is they've added text to it. So as you can see, it says up to 800 millimeters of effective, chemical resistance, and then researchable modification, so, you get to see it. And yeah, it says protection against ATGM, so basically anything which has like a HE warhead or anything like that on it. So we're talking about HVARs, we're talking about heat rounds, heat FS, we're talking about, as it says, ATGMs, anything like that you'll get extra protection from. But after talking to a few people on the Discord, such as Nathan, Bad Mofo, they've actually given me some thoughts that I didn't really think of during this, which may affect its gameplay more than just having its ERA on. So let's read through it. So the T64-BV is a new researchable modification for the T64B tanks, which adds a reactive set in War Thunder Updates 1.79, Pimp the Tank. Alright. In short, a new modification for the T64B, which makes your favorite tank even cooler. I mean, ERA to me does not look cool. It looks like... I don't want to bring up pictures of it, but I'm going to describe it to you. So one of my phobias, I don't really have many of them, is there is a picture where a Sherman has been annihilated by either 20 millimeters or 30 millimeters from like a testing range, and it has a bunch of holes in it. And then there was this fake picture going around online of people who have like big circles taken out of their skin in a kind of fungal way and have like little frogs or something growing out of them. And those craters, like, whenever I think about having craters on my skin or anything like that, it screws me up massively, and I'm sure now on the Discord there's just going to be a ton of pictures, so I'm not going to go there for a day. But for me, that's what ERA looks like. It takes away the pureness, the vanilla look of a tank, and adds a bunch of acne, or adds a bunch of those spots. And for me, obviously, I prefer the clean version instead of the infested one. So yeah, anyway, the Contact ERA set adds excellent defense to the hull and turret against ATGMs and HE shells. In the early 1960s, the USSR had successful tests of reactive armor against explosive force, and by the early 1980s, a unified set of reactive add-on armor called Contact was ready to boost the defenses of the current tank fleet, and for installation on new vehicle models. Among the tanks which successfully completed state tests of the new reactive configuration was the medium T64B tank, which was later modernized and given a new designation, the T64B. So, one of the things I was talking about with a few people as well was the idea why nowadays in modern combat we don't see a lot of ATGMs when it comes to trying to take on tanks, apart from stuff like maybe RPGs from the minor nations. But generally, if you look at tank combat, the shell types are very much geared towards this idea of APFSDS and all of its modernized versions of it. I mean, I know Rheinmetall are working on a new gun, and they're also working on a new shell for it, which is very much similar to how APFSDS is modeled nowadays, but just, taking that idea further, why going down the heat round, or the heat FS round, became null and void. And it's basically because of ideas like this, and also stuff like Chobham armor and Stillbrew armor, where they were really cranking up the defense you could have against stuff which was very common at the time. So heat FS, heat shells were very common. So what they did was they just scaled it up against it. And obviously it was either easier to do or more practical to do, and that's why they did it. So for the T64-BV, taking a tank and adding extra armor on top of it to make sure that it had that extra, defense from heat makes sense. But nowadays, when we talk about what it's actually going up against, such as the Leopard 2K, the Challenger, the M1 Abrams, and now the Type 90 that's been talked about, I don't think it will make that much of a difference because all of them are slinging darts. They're not slinging heat. The only one which this is going to be effective against is one of the top-tier French vehicles, the Brennus. And the Brennus already gets an APFS DS round, but the grind to it is the issue. Also, a stock MBT-70, a stock KPZ-70 won't be able to do anything against this. So yeah, that is also something to think about, maybe unless you hit the lower front plate. But it is definitely an interesting thing in tank design as we go through the years that this was seen as a modification which would definitely help out against these ideas. You have a wonderful picture here basically showing where the ERA is. If you want to know where it is, you can see it's on about 2/3 of the sides of the vehicle. It's on the upper front plate here. It's also on the turret in two, I suppose you'd call it triangular mounts, and then there's a little bit above as well. So when I talk about this affecting rockets and incoming ordnance from CAS, what I mean is this area here, and also this area here. This area here, if it's unguarded and a HVAR gets through or something like that, and for some reason it's able to hit an optic port and go through, can annihilate your T64B. But with this extra protection against, chemical stuff, then that actually might stop it. So that might be a little hidden addition, which a few people might not think about. In our game, the T64B is a hero of high-ranked tank battles. The vehicle has complex combined protection for hull and turrets, which does a good job of absorbing the energy of kinetic shells and even some chemical rounds. Well, pretty much all chemical rounds, actually. Thanks to the reactive add-on armor, the T64-BV is able to withstand hits from the most powerful heat shells and ATGMs of the HOT series. In the case where the hit occurs in the zone of maximum protection on the tank, at the same time the reactive blocks are destroyed when shells hit them from volleys of high-caliber machine guns or automatic anti-air cannons, so 20mm, 30mm, 35, stuff like that. Demolition bomb explosions can even blow off the reactive blocks from whole area on the tank, so the new system is far from a panacea against enemy fire. Yeah, but what it does is in the initial, it is able to stop either those machine gun rounds or it's able to stop the bombs from hitting them. There is this idea that it gives you a second chance, and that's kind of how I see it in game. With the Brennus or with the Rise right now, against heat, it does give you a second chance once, if you're hit by something, and it means that you can fire back. A lot of the engagements in War Thunder, just like real life, are very much decided on who gets the first shot off. I believe there's a statistic that the Chieftain World of Tanks guy talks about a lot, and it's either like 80% or 4 out of 5, maybe a bit less, maybe a bit more. I can't remember the actual statistic, but it's very high, and he's basically talking about the amount of times that a tank engagement starts, who wins the battle. And it's, a very high percentage chance that if you fire first, then you are going to win that battle. So that is one of the main key things that, you should focus on if you're fighting. And that's pretty much the same in War Thunder. Generally, if you get hit, either your gun's going to be knocked out, your gunner's going to be knocked out, you're going to be on fire, you're going to be dead. So there are many instances where what happens is you just die from getting hit once, and then either you pop up on the map and people start shooting you, or you're dead from that one single round. So the initial setup and the initial making sure to spot enemies first is incredibly important over other stuff. Now, with the T64-BV and other tanks which have ERA, this gives you an additional buffer just in case you don't spot an enemy who's firing HEAT-FS, or ATGMs. Now, the majority of people aren't using them right now, but at least, it's a thought. One of the things that was kind of interesting when update 1.77 came out, a lot of people, including content creators, I think Fly made a video on it, I think somebody else did as well, but they basically talked about the Rakuten Jagdpanzer II Hawk coming back in a big way because they would be able to pen a lot of these higher tier tanks, and obviously being a German vehicle, it's going to get matched up against the Soviets quite a lot, or at least it should do, and with that, the ATGM from something like a Rakuten Jagdpanzer II Hot is going to be able to be eaten by these ERA blocks. So using that as an idea, or at least it should be eaten by the ERA blocks. So from that idea, it means that this thing definitely has more defense against those specific vehicles. But right now, the meta, which is going to stay the meta as long as the game modes don't change, is MBT. So APFSDS, and against APFSDS, this won't make that much of a difference, or at least it shouldn't do. They have a little joke here. In the War Thunder team, there is a joke that the BV index in the tank's designation are the initials of our lead game designer, Belyanikov Vyacheslav. I'm sorry if I screwed that up. And of course, this tank will be impossible to destroy. I really hope that this guy's a big burly man, like he looks like a caveman. Because then it would fit. If he's a little short ass, then it wouldn't make a lot of sense. The upgrades to the T64-BV version will be implemented in the form of a researchable modification for the T64-B in War Thunder in update 1.79. After researching this modification, the tank's appearance will change, but any camouflage, decals, or decorative items installed will remain. So very much similar to how we have add-on armor at the lower tiers, whether it be tracks. If you've realized, if you put like a decal on something like a Sherman, and then the tracks go on top of it, then the decal is under the tracks. So that is something you'll have to think about. If you want your tank to look really shiny and really nice, with some cool historical or even unhistorical decals, then obviously what you're going to have to do is sort that out to the ERA. Something that Mofo talked about on the Discord, which I think is definitely worth bringing up, is the fact that how odd are these plates going to be? So they basically have an effective thickness of about 5mm against Kinetic. But if they're modeled as some form of spaced armor, or if they're modeled to actually, pen with the APFSDS warhead, be able to trigger it before it actually gets into the tank, what is going to be its effect on kinetic rounds? Because the example he brought up was the kill shot on the T64B, in his opinion, which is basically here, right? It's basically around this area, so you can hit the turret, you have a nice side shot, so you can do it from, quite decent angled, especially with an M1 Abrams or anything like that, with APFSDS, same with the Leopard 2K, and even the MBT. So, how are these ERA blocks going to react when they're faced with Kinetic? Are they just going to exist as an extra 5mm on top of the already existing armor, or are they going to exist as spaced armor, which is going to trigger warheads? So that is definitely something to consider, and we're going to have to see how it works in game. The ERA machines that we have right now, in the form of stuff like the Brennus and the Rise, these are not massively well-armored tanks compared to what people are slinging at them, so therefore they really are only about is HE, basically just stopping heat rounds or HE rounds. With the T64B, it is a very well-armored tank, so adding on extra armor, how much of an effect is that actually going to have against Kinetic, and will it mean that it will bring it up to the likes of stuff like the Type 90? My personal opinion? No, I don't think so at all. It would probably just act as an extra 5mm and therefore not really make a difference, but it's definitely something to think about and something I will be testing once the dev server comes around to see how it triggers, the APFSDS rounds. At the same time, something else that needs to be talked about is there is something here. Now, the lower front plate is a kill shot on the T64B. Also the siders, the driver's port if you can hit it, and also if you're very lucky near the breach, if it doesn't get eaten by the breach. But the easiest kill shot if you're looking straight at one is the lower front plate. There seems to be something added to this lower front plate, and it seems to be a little bit more armor. You can see it in the form of a triangle. It's very prominent on this picture here, and also on the lower bit. So with that said, I don't think you can see it anywhere else, no. How much effective armor, well, you can see it here, actually. How much effective armor is this? This little area here. Because if it means that it ricochets more, or if it means that the lower front plate is not as easy to penetrate, then this machine's going to become even more, strong from the front, which is something that is going to be hilarious when you face one looking at you. I mean, it will just promote more of the same meta of flanking and spanking, so it might not make that much of a difference, but once again, it's another thing to test. Also, on top of this, since the BV is getting its ERA, what I would also like to see is the Challenger get its ERA. It's been a hot topic for a very long time that the Challenger has a combat package, I think is the way you could describe it, that it doesn't have in the game right now. And a lot of people have speculated the reason why they've done this is so when they want to add another Challenger, they can give it this combat package. The best way to Chieftain. I just want to show you, just so you know what I'm on about. Oops. Chieftain tank. So I'm not, I'm not screwing you. First of all, there's this here, but then there's the ERA blocks, which is probably the easiest thing to see. I mean, I suppose it is on this one. That's not a real one. That's a Centurion. But yeah, basically this here. So, a Chieftain tank would not go into battle without this guard that you see on the lower front plate. Right, no, what am I on about? I'm talking about Challenger. Here we go. Nope, that's also That's why I'm having issues. Here we go. Here's the big boy. So you can see this, right? This is the Challenger 2. This is the Challenger 1. There is an area here which is designed for this, right? For this basic ERA to be put on front of it. And the way to see it is kind of a combat package kind of deal. There's also a few little additions, especially when you look at the Challenger 2, but on the Challenger 1 it's the same thing. What would be really nice is to have the Challenger 1 get that ERA package on the front of it in some form of modification very much similar to the T64-BV. If they decide to make it a different vehicle, then that would be incredibly sad, but at least it would give a little bit of extra armor to the massive weak spot that is the Challenger's lower front plate right now in War Thunder. So hopefully that's at least thought of, especially in the light of the T64-BV coming out. But overall, I don't really think this is worth a devblog. We've seen pictures of the T64-BV in-game, we've also seen it in Q&As and stuff, but it's still nice to have a chat about, mainly about the ERA itself, not the vehicle. But the most important thing for me is how it affects APF SDS right now, because that's the major round, and I'm going to have to test on the dev server, and I will do when it comes around. But anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.